Sam, hate to interrupt you. I'll get right back to you in a second, but we have some breaking news out of the NBA. The Pelicans are hiring Jamahl Mosley as their next head coach. That's per multiple reports. He spent the past 5 seasons in charge of the Orlando Magic, but was fired after the Magic blew a 3-1 lead in the first round to the Pistons. Mosley will replace Willie Green, who was fired in the midst of his 5th season in New Orleans. The Pelicans finished with the 8th worst record in the NBA this season and do not have a first-round pick in this year's draft. But it's steady improvement that Mosley showed year over year as the head coach of the Magic, something that the Pelicans certainly could use in New Orleans. Sam Quinn still here with us. Now we can get right back to you, Sam. And I ask you, how do you feel about this hire for New Orleans? Personally, as a Magic fan, I'm happy to see him land back on his feet in Mosley. But how do you think this can maybe work out with how fast things turned around from going to Orlando and now New Orleans?
It wasn't quite that fast. This has been one of the worst kept secrets in the NBA for a while. There was reporting all the way back in November from Jake Fisher about New Orleans being interested in Jamahl Mosley. Even when he was still coaching the Magic, it had kind of become clear towards the end of the season that Mosley was not going to come back to the Magic. Obviously, that first-round series against Detroit might have changed things had he been able to win it. Franz Wagner gets hurt. Obviously, he doesn't. He ends up getting fired. And the Pelicans pull the trigger on a hire here that I think is going to be primarily based on defense. Orlando had 2 top 5 defenses in a row, 2024, 2025. This year they fell off, but Jalen Suggs was hurt. There were a lot of injuries throughout that roster. This strikes me more than anything as the Pelicans trying to build a defensive culture. Now, they have Herb Jones, one of the best and most versatile defenders in the NBA. There is not that much defensively after him. I have some questions about the roster. I have some questions about the offense because those Orlando offenses were kind of a mess, especially at the end. Not a lot of ball movement, not a lot of, they didn't have much shooting, so you do have to kind of take some credit there. But those offenses in Orlando at the end were kind of tough. I would like to know what the roster plan here is. But I think if you're starting from scratch, as they kind of are, one of the worst teams in the NBA last season, building a defensive culture isn't the worst place to start.
I think that calling it kind of tough offensive situation is putting it nicely. It was tough. It was tough to watch. So then how does New Orleans get excited for this? How do you see a path forward of how they can figure out a way to score enough buckets? Because even if you stop someone, you still need to score.
They've got to figure out the roster. There's such big questions here, right? They trade for Derek Queen last year. There's all this drama surrounding this trade. How could they give him an unprotected pick? It lands at number 8, so you get a little bit of reprieve. You don't have to live forever with the idea that you could have had A.J. Debinsa or Darren Peterson. The number 8 pick for Derek Queen, closer to a fair trade, although I still have some major questions. But Derek Queen and Zion Williamson just don't fit together. They're the same player, essentially. They're offensive-centric, power forward center types, not really shooters, not great defenders, although Zion did take some steps in that regard this season. They've got to figure that out. Are they going to trade Zion? They've indicated at every turn, no, they don't plan to. There's not much shooting on that team. Can you get some shooting in the building? Can you get anybody other than Herb Jones who's going to defend consistently? So the truth about this hire is that I can't say too much until I know who's going to be on the team in the next year or two, because right now they've got a lot of interesting pieces. The whole league seems to want to trade for Trey Murphy. Great shooter, great athlete. Herb Jones probably has a lot of interest around the league too, although his offense falling off over the last year or so probably doesn't help. So I have to see what the roster is going to look like before I say anything definitive. But let's start with Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen. You took 2 rookies last year in the lottery. How can you retrofit the roster to fit those guys? You put shooters, you put defenders around them. That's going to be their best chance to win. When you think of New Orleans still nowadays, it's still Zion that you go to first. He's coming off of playing 62 games this season, which is the 2nd most ever in his career, averaged 21 points per game. Can this be a team that can live with Zion as your number 1 star, your go-to guy, and figure out a way to make it work despite maybe the similarities with him and Derek Queen? Or how do you push forward with Zion on your roster right now? Yeah, so this is my question, right? What did we just experience with Jamahl Mosley in Orlando for years? It was, can Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner play together? Oh, they're both these big ball handlers, neither of them great shooters. They need a lot of spacing around them. They kind of bump into each other. They look better when one of them's out, when one of them's healthy. So I wonder if we're going to run into some similar problems here in New Orleans. Jamahl Mosley not really known for his offensive creativity. Zion is coming off of a really underrated season. I know he's had the injury problems for his entire career, played 62 games, obviously. I don't know that you can depend on him to be a franchise player, number one option. I don't think he can play enough minutes to do that, frankly. I think his best role moving forward is going to be on a team where he can kind of be load managed, not just miss games, miss back-to-backs, but also could you play him 25, 28 minutes instead of into the 30s, because that's what your best bet is going to be as far as keeping him fresh. So I'm not super optimistic about this fit from here, but you do still have 3 years of team control on Derek Queen on that cheap rookie contract. Zion's contract non-guaranteed. You can get out of this fit if it doesn't work. I'm optimistic about both players separately. It's together that I just don't really see the fit.
26 wins this season for the Pelicans. That's 5 better than what the Magic had in 21 wins when Mosley took over that team in Orlando. But I could understand why Mosley would want that job in the Eastern Conference, that even back then, outside of LeBron, it was like, okay, what's going on? But what do you think about this team right here with the Pelicans that missed the play-in by 11 games? What is enticing, what's intriguing about this job for why Mosley would even want to take it? Because it feels like a rebuild is putting it nicely.
There is talent here. I think you can criticize the Pelicans for a lot of the way that they've conducted their business, a lot of their decisions. They're not great at managing assets. They're not great at managing contracts. They don't seem to have a clear vision of what kind of team they want to be, at least based on the players they have. But Troy Weaver, the one thing he does really well is look at players and say, he's talented, let's bring him in the building. He was the general manager for the Pistons when they drafted Asar Thompson, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren. He won 14 games in his last season because he refused to get them any shooting. But he did find a lot of talented players, and that New Orleans team does have a lot of talented players. Trey Murphy's not an all-star, but guys who can shoot and are as athletic as him are very, very desirable. Herb Jones can do anything on defense. He can guard centers, he can guard point guards, he can guard anybody in between. Zion Williamson, you got to be careful with his minutes. You got to be careful with his workload. But he is coming off of that spectacular season where I think by the end there were moments where he looks like an all-star again. There are a lot of talented players in this building. It's your job as an organization and a coaching staff to figure out, how can we make Zion and Derek Queen work together? And if the answer is no, how can we maximize the return for one of them? How can we take advantage of Jeremiah Fear's athleticism as a point guard and get to the rim? Really exciting offensive player. Can you surround him with more shooting, really maximize him in that way? What can you do defensively outside of having Herb Jones guard just about everybody? Is there a scheme that works best with these guys? What can you do with your depth? You know, there's some questions there. I think they did have some nice finds on the back of their roster. Of course, in years past, players like Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, they've done a good job of discovering diamonds in the rough. But right now, this roster is just kind of a collection of players. It's not really a coherent team. I think it's going to take 1 or 2 years for them to really figure out who's our franchise player, who are we building around, what is our preferred style. Once they've done that, there are enough good pieces in the building, there's enough assets to work with as far as making trades, that they could conceivably be a somewhat competitive team. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
And we'll have to see if the Pelicans will be patient enough to let Mosley do his job. I went too far back in time also when I said that Mosley joined a Magic team that had LeBron in the East. He was already, of course, with the Lakers back then. Thank you so much, Sam and Quinn. Appreciate it. And we'll see what happens for the Pelicans moving forward and the other teams in the NBA that still need a head coach, like my Orlando Magic, who fired Jamahl Mosley. Still don't have a head guy. The Bulls saying bye-bye to Billy Donovan. They're waiting for a head coach as well. We'll see maybe some more, what do they call it? Musical chairs could continue with the head coaching carousel. We shall see. Stay tapped in to HQ, and we'll keep you covered.